Imagine a freezing winter morning, inside the gloomy chamber of Blois Castle, where the pale glow of a candle flickered against the face of a dying woman. Her body was swollen like a rotting tree trunk, her skin yellowed, blotched with decay, her breath thick with the stench of death. From her mouth seeped a black, viscous fluid that soaked the bed sheets, filling the room with the suffocating odor of the grave. This woman was once the most powerful figure in France, holding in her hands the lives of thousands, spreading terror and bloodshed across Europe. Yet now, she had no soldiers, no courtiers, no more cries of adulation, only the groans of her own torment. She was Catherine de Medici, Queen Mother of France, the woman who ruled through 3 kings, cursed as the monster of France, and the architect of some of the bloodiest massacres of the 16th century. How did an orphaned girl from Florence, dismissed as a foreigner, rise to the pinnacle of a royal dynasty? And how did a life steeped in ambition, intrigue, and rivers of blood come to end in such humiliation and pain? Let us turn back the clock and uncover the journey of Catherine de Medici from a political pawn to the Black Queen, and at last to a death so wretched that even her enemies shuddered to recall it. Florence, year 1519. In the dazzling city of art and political intrigue, a baby girl was born. She carried the name of the Medici, the wealthiest and most powerful banking dynasty of Italy, but also a family haunted by betrayal, enemies, and blood. From the first breath, Catherine bore tragedy. Her father, Lorenzo de Medici, Duke of Urbino, died only weeks after her birth. Her mother, Madeleine de la Tour d'Auvergne, soon followed him to the grave, a newborn child, opening her eyes only to find herself an orphan. In a city where power was bought with coin and dagger, Catherine was not seen as a helpless infant, but as a valuable pawn on Europe's chessboard. Instead of love, Catherine was raised under guardians who regarded her as diplomatic property. Her education was unlike that of ordinary children. Beyond French, Latin, and Greek, she was trained in rare arts. Few women ever learned how to read faces to detect lies, how to use charm as a weapon of manipulation, and even how to recognize and handle poison. Her tutors were not philosophers but spies, assassins, and masters of Renaissance power games. They forged the orphan girl into a cold instrument of politics, a living weapon to be traded for the greatest alliances in Europe. And indeed, in 1533, when Catherine was only 14, her fate was sealed. The Medici arranged her marriage to Henry, Duke of Orleans, the second son of King François I of France. A young Italian girl, dismissed as an outsider, was to enter a foreign court, a world of glittering candles hiding daggers, of polite smiles, concealing ambition, where she would have to fight each day simply to survive. For the House of Valois, Catherine brought a massive dowry and access to the Medici banking network, a source of funds to fuel wars against the Habsburgs. For the Medici, a marriage into the French royal family was a shield against countless Italian foes. But for the 14-year-old bride, it was nothing more than a transaction. She was the commodity. From the moment she set foot in Paris, Catherine knew she would forever be an outsider. The French nobility sneered at her as the Italian merchant's daughter, a woman whose rank was bought with money rather than noble blood. Her short stature, plain features, and tendency to grow stout made her an object of mockery at courtly banquets. The humiliation deepened when she discovered the harsh truth. Her husband, Henry, I had no affection for his young wife. Long before the marriage, his heart belonged to Diane de Poitiers, a refined widow, 20 years his senior. Diane was not merely a mistress, but the true power in Henry's life. At official ceremonies, she appeared adorned with jewels, lands, and titles that should have belonged to Catherine. For the first 10 years of her marriage, Catherine endured public disgrace. She watched her husband obey his mistress more than anyone else. Princes and courtiers treated her as surplus, an intruder. In the palace where she should have been queen, she was little more than an uninvited guest. Yet these years did not break Catherine's will. Instead, they steeled her. She learned to mask pain behind a calm face, to listen to gossip and draw from it the weaknesses of her enemies. Quietly, Catherine turned humiliation into lesson, scorn into weapon, biding her time until the game shifted, and the moment finally came when fate upended the royal succession of France, pulling Catherine from the shadows into the throne itself. In 1547, destiny struck Francois, the king's eldest son, died unexpectedly. The crown of France, once far from Catherine's reach, now fell directly into her husband's hands. Henry ascended as King Henry II, and Catherine at last became Queen of France. But the crown did not bring the glory Catherine had hoped for. At grand ceremonies, it was not Catherine but Diane de Poitiers who stood at the king's side, receiving diamond necklaces, estates, and even the right to intervene in state affairs. Catherine, though queen, remained only a shadow, pushed to the margins. Yet it was precisely these years of neglect that became her true school of power. Catherine began building a secret network of spies, spreading across Paris and reaching into the courts of Europe. She bribed attendants, recruited cooks, guards, even chambermaids, turning them into loyal eyes and ears. At the same time, Catherine delved into the dark arts of politics, the study of poisons. In the castle cellars, she secretly tested toxins on prisoners. A few drops of invisible liquid could kill without leaving a trace. This was the weapon Catherine believed could change the balance of power. Beyond that, she skillfully exploited the growing religious divide between Catholics and Protestants Huguenots. While kings and nobles clashed with swords, Catherine quietly spread rumors, deepening the hatred between factions, and through this, she became the only one who could mediate or ignite conflict at will. During the reign of Henry II, Catherine learned that true power did not lie in the throne or title, but in the control of information and fear. Though she still endured her husband's devotion to Diane de Poitiers, Catherine transformed herself into a phantom within the palace, silently observing, recording weaknesses, and preparing for her eruption. That day came sooner than anyone expected. In 1559, during a jousting tournament, a lance pierced Henry II's helmet and drove into his skull. The king collapsed into a prolonged agony, and when he finally drew his last breath, all of France was shaken. As for Catherine, the woman who had suffered decades of humiliation, she was now free of both husband and rival. Diane de Poitiers was expelled from court, and Catherine stepped onto the stage of politics, no longer forced to hide behind anyone. The crown now passed to Francois II, Catherine's eldest son, but he was only 15, frail and sickly. Everyone understood that behind the facade of royal ceremony, it was Catherine who controlled every decision. She seized this chance with an iron, merciless hand. But power, once gained, quickly wavered. Francois II died after only 1 year of rule. The crown passed next to Charles IX, only 10 years old. And then, when Charles died at 24, the throne passed again to the third son, Henry III. 3 kings changed, yet the true ruler remained only one, Catherine de Medici. For over 2 decades, she governed France through her sons, and with each reign, Catherine reinforced her power with cunning and ruthlessness. Behind the palace walls, she became a master of psychological manipulation. With Charles IX, a fearful and fragile boy, she used maternal affection to dominate. With Henry III conflicted and incompetent, she nurtured dependence, turning him into her puppet. Anyone who dared to challenge Catherine's authority disappeared from the board, sometimes through mysterious accidents, sometimes by a single accusation that ruined reputations forever. This was also the era when Catherine played her most dangerous card: religion. France was drowning in conflict between Catholics and Protestant Huguenots. Instead of easing tensions, Catherine turned them into a weapon. She bargained with one side to threaten the other, stocket enmities, spread hatred, and in the process, secured her own power. The climax of this strategy was one of the most horrific massacres in European history. The event that would seal Catherine's name in blood, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. In the year 1572, on August 23rd, 1572, Paris was filled with lights and music in celebration of a major political marriage. Marguerite de Valois, Catherine's daughter, was wed to Henry of Navarre, a Protestant prince. The wedding was promoted as a symbol of reconciliation between Catholics and Protestants after years of conflict. But behind the blessings and wine, Catherine had prepared a bloody game. In the weeks before the wedding, she quietly spread rumors of a Protestant plot to assassinate the royal family. Paris was tense with suspicion, taut as a bowstring. And then, on the wedding night, as Huguenot leaders gathered at the Louvre, Catherine struck. Shouts and the clash of steel rang through the palace. Catholic soldiers, under Catherine's direct orders, stormed into the banquet hall and turned the feast into a slaughterhouse. Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, leader of the Huguenots, was stabbed dozens of times, his body thrown into the street, left for the frenzied mob to mutilate. But the nightmare did not stop there. Within hours, the killing spread throughout Paris. Protestant homes were broken into, men hacked down at their doorsteps, women raped and murdered, children thrown into the Seine. Over 3 days, more than 70,000 Huguenots were massacred across France. The streets became rivers of blood, the stench of corpses suffocating the city. Catherine was said to have watched it all from a Louvre window. Witnesses claimed her face bore a look of satisfaction. To her, this was not just a political purge, but personal revenge for years of being scorned as the Italian outsider. The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre marked the peak of Catherine's power. She proved that with a single nod, she could command the fate of both religion and politics in France. Yet from that night on, her authority began to rot. The brutality of the massacre horrified Europe. Catholic allies grew wary. Protestant enemies vowed vengeance. And even the French people began to whisper a chilling question. Could a woman still be human after ordering an entire nation to bathe in blood instead of ending the wars? The deaths of tens of thousands of Protestants only deepened the roots of hatred. Moderate leaders were eliminated, leaving space for extremists to rise. France was now plunged into endless storms of blood, a religious civil war that would last for decades. Meanwhile, Catherine's health began to decline. Shortness of breath, agonizing joint pain, failing eyesight all left her increasingly weakened. Some whispered she was now tasting the very poisons she had used all her life against others. A cruel irony, the poisoner dying by her own craft. French politics grew ever more chaotic. In 1574, Charles IX, her second son whom she controlled, died at the age of 24, likely of tuberculosis. Though many suspected Catherine had a hand in it once he began to show independence, the crown passed to Henry III, her last surviving son. But Henry was no stronger. On the contrary, He was seen as unstable, weak, and utterly lacking political skill. In this situation, Catherine made a fatal mistake, allying with the Catholic League, led by the House of Guise. She believed she could use them to restore order, but instead she nourished a monster. Within a few years, the Catholic League had become a force greater than both Henry III and Catherine herself. In 1588, when Henry III suddenly ordered the assassination of Henri de Guise, leader of the League, right inside Blois Castle, Catherine was forced to witness it. The woman who had long used murder to strengthen power now saw her own son choose the path of blood, but out of desperation, not strength. Instead of reinforcing the crown, the assassination only pushed the Valois dynasty to the brink. Catherine was no longer the manipulator. She was being devoured by the very forces she had created. The court fell into chaos. France was fractured by countless factions, and the power in her hands slipped away like sand through her fingers. From the woman who once spread terror, Catherine became old, sick, and increasingly alone. The nightmare of her final years had begun. Illness tormented her, hour by hour, minute by minute. Her legs swelled into grotesque shapes, resembling rotting tree stumps. Her once pale skin turned a sickly yellow, mottled with dark bruises. Her joints ached so terribly that every movement made her scream in despair. From her mouth seeped a black, foul liquid that stained her pillows and sheets, so vile that even her most loyal servants covered their noses and turned away. Catherine was almost completely isolated. Henry III, her last surviving son, was consumed with trying to protect his crumbling throne and rarely visited his mother. Courtiers feared her, avoiding her like a ghost. In those long, dark days, Catherine was left with nothing but herself and her haunting memories. Servants recalled that she often raved in delirium, murmuring names. At times, she whispered with triumphant smiles, as if reliving the moment she watched the St. Yves and Bartholomew's Day massacre from the windows of the Louvre. But at other times, she wept and screamed, as though the souls of the victims had returned, surrounding her sickbed to demand payment in blood. She called out Coligny's name, called out those she herself had sent to their deaths. Her groans echoed through the halls of Blois like a curse. The physicians were helpless. They tried everything: bloodletting, poultice, even leeches, but nothing did more than weaken her further. They recorded in detail her agonies, leaving posterity with a ghastly image, a body rotting while still alive, slowly becoming a corpse that cried out. At dawn on January 5th, 1589, Catherine breathed her last. No tears were shed. No courtiers gathered. No grand funeral worthy of a queen mother. Henry III held only a minimal, cold ceremony, as if France wished to erase the memory of the woman who had drowned the kingdom in blood. The death of Catherine de Medici was not only the end of a woman's life, but the closing of a bloody chapter in French history. For more than 3 decades, she had manipulated the throne, turned religion into a weapon, and made of the nation a chessboard, where every move cost human lives. Yet all that power, all those plots and bargains sealed in blood, brought her no glory, only a dark and cursed legacy. She had dreamed of building a strong Valois dynasty, but her sons died young or proved inept. She had sought to stabilize France, but her ruthless policies dragged it into decades of civil war. She craved power for revenge, but in the end, that very power imprisoned her, leading to a painful and lonely death. Today, Catherine de Medici remains remembered as a symbol of cruelty and insatiable ambition. She showed that women could wield political influence as ruthlessly as male tyrants. but also proved that limitless power, when stripped of morality and compassion, leads only to destruction. Her miserable death was the final judgment not from a court, nor from her enemies, but from history itself and the conscience of humanity. Catherine de Medici sowed the wind all her life, and in the end, she reaped the storm,